Basically, well, let's just get started. I'm Susan Wyman with the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild and Gunnison Gardens. I just want to welcome everyone to the Locavore Roundtable, where we're going to brainstorm and share some of our visions for a vibrant local food system. So in this 1 hour session, we're going to start with existing organizations in the Gunnison Valley. And they're going to take 3 to 5 minutes and describe what each of them are doing. We'll hear from the Gunnison Food Pantry and Mountain Roots Food Project, the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild, and the Center for Cold Climate Security. And after that 3 to 5 minute, just brief introduction about what these organizations are doing to build a local resilient food system. Then Paul Planer is going to briefly discuss his vision for a locavore movement, and we'll open up the session for ideas and questions and discussion and just brainstorming. So you can enter your ideas into the chat box at any time, and we will read as many of those as possible. And you'll also have an opportunity, if you'd like, to turn on your video and turn on your microphone and have a discussion and talk out loud. That's, I think, how we're going to do this roundtable. So, and I'll just say one thing as we're kind of putting together our vision and our ideas and our brainstorming for local food. It occurred to me that we all need to be kind of like JFK, who says, "Ask not." Well, we're going to paraphrase, right? We're going to ask not what local food can do for you, but think about what you can do for local food. So we're all in this together, and this is a brainstorming roundtable. And I'm seeing farmers, and I'm seeing a lot of backyard gardeners and restaurant folks, and this is just going to be a great roundtable. So with that, is Katie Dix here. Katie is the executive director of the Gunnison Country Food Pantry. And Katie, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk to us 3 to 5 minutes about, local food and food security and what the food pantry is doing.
Thank you. I'm very excited to say that maybe we can play in this arena. The Gunnison Country Food Pantry is fed 1,400 families last year. Many of them came to us because they were truly and hungry, and many came to us because they were scared of COVID. But either way, everybody that walked up to the door got a bundle of food. They can come once a week, and we're still giving out those bundles and serving everyone who asks. But because we received the Colorado Food Assistance Grant or funding, we have a little more money than sometimes we have, and we can be slightly more generous with buying food from local producers than sometimes we have to. Many times we have to get it as much as we can, as least expensive as we can. And we have already made connections with egg growers, and we are looking for other opportunities where we can buy locally and give that out in our food bundles.
Thank you, Katie. That was a wonderful introduction, and how the food pantry is working with local food and just the valuable service that you guys provide. Next, we're going to turn it over to Holly Conn. Holly is the director of the Mountain Roots Food Project. Just like Katie, I'm sure it would be difficult to summarize everything that you're doing in 5 minutes. But Holly, do you want to take over and talk about what the Mountain Roots Food Project is doing with local food and food security?
Sure, I'll try. I think I might have misunderstood the opening remarks, so I also have some things on the vision for the future of local food, or maybe that comes up in the Locavore movement. To try to just touch on our current efforts. We've been working in the local food arena for 10 years, and we're trying to boost both production and consumption, boost supply and demand, connect all consumers and all producers, increase the number of producers, increase the number of consumers in so many different ways, starting with little kids with education in the school, community education, restaurants, seasonal eating, sort of every area of of the local food arena. Specifically with food security, if this is supposed to be focused on food security, I would say that, you know, everything that we do through an equity lens. And when we feel like the local food system is one of our country's, one of our nation's, one of our world's best hopes for correcting the damages that have been done by the global industrialized food system that has emerged since World War II. And we want to encourage people to take their power back. And I believe, and people who join Mountain Roots believe, that we can do that by localizing our food system, getting more people involved in producing, and so many things. Sorry, I'm kind of going into the vision. What we're doing now, we run the food farm to school program for the school district. We push into classrooms. We help with cafeteria school meal reform, and we offer summer programming and after school programming for children so that they develop a sense from an early age of how their food choices affect the health of their bodies, the health of the economy, the health of the community, and the health of the environment. To boost food production at the community scale and at the individual scale, we are growing ourselves into community farm spaces at a production scale, and at the same time training the next generation of farmers so that young agrarians can learn the skills they need, and hopefully go on to be a ripple effect, not only in our community, but to take what they're doing out into the big wide world and take their farming skills to other places. At the community scale, we're supporting a network of home gardeners, and we also run a few community gardens so that people, again, can take power into their own hands and be more self-sufficient. I feel like that is one of the most powerful ways we can break down at least the cost barrier that many people say exists just to access healthy food, let alone local food. Local food, healthy food can be free if you grow it yourself. And so then in our food security arm, again, I was saying we work through an equity lens, and we try to do food rescue and food donation program called Backyard Harvest that connects neighbors to neighbors, and also addresses the food waste issue that is so prevalent in our world today. We realize that people who are on low incomes and often struggling with poverty are making choices between whether to pay their heating bills or their rent bills or to buy clothes or to put food on the table. And we want to try to break down not only the cost barriers, but the education barriers that exist for people who often struggle with food insecurity, are often also undereducated, unfortunately, about health and nutrition. So we try to raise up the level of education to help build the why people should care about local food. And we do that through Cooking Matters classes, which are free, 6-week courses offered to free to low income people. They learn how to cook healthy meals on a budget of $10 or less for a family of 4, also how to shop smarter. And they get a bag of groceries to take home after their classes so that they can repeat the lessons that they've learned, and they also get food through that. We are working to develop a produce prescription program where our healthcare providers start to take a proactive approach to the care and feeding of our community by literally prescribing people who have either food insecurity issues or health concerns to eat more fruits and vegetables, and to provide incentives like vouchers for them to purchase from local farms and other local outlets for food. We are also working in the food economy arena because we know that charitable efforts are amazing, but in order for this all to be sustainable, the farmer needs to get the lion's share of the food dollar. And we know that that isn't really what's happening with the industrial food system that we have now. So our work there involves supporting the development and growth and scaling up of all food related businesses, from the producers like Gunnison Gardens, Iola Farms, Polly O'Brosler's Hot Sauce, Ellen's Pickles, you know, whoever is in the food arena, we want to support them and help them scale up and grow their businesses in a way that's not just sustainable, but profitable and thriving. And we know that we have to boost supply and demand at the same time. So boosting demand is a little bit about education. It's a lot about aggregation, processing, distribution, and connection. So we're trying to make those connections here within the Valley, and also to connect our Valley to the food hubs in our region so that we can get more food moving around the region, and that Gunnison can show up as a both giver and receiver in the local food distribution circuit. And then finally, our fifth focus area of work is food policy, and it's an area for future growth. We don't actively pursue policy issues, but if we run up against them, we will address them. And I guess that's it in a nutshell. I'll hand it over to the next person.
Sue, you're muted.
It was difficult to summarize in 5 minutes. You are doing so much in the Valley. And next, this is Susan Wyman. I'm going to talk briefly about what the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild is doing. And then Dannah will talk about the Center for Cold Climate Food Security. And then Paul will talk next. So just really briefly, I know a lot of folks hadn't heard much about the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild. We're a 501c6 organization, and we've been in existence for about 3 years now. And we're a group of what we call producers and co-producers. So we're farmers and ranchers. And then the co-producers are gardeners, chefs, cooks, anyone who eats, anyone who's interested in local food. One of the main things we do is we hold a plant sale, 2 plant sales every spring. We'll have one in April and one in May, to support backyard gardeners, and so that local gardeners can grow the plants that we grow as producers, farms and ranches. We have put on this conference. That's a big event for us. And also the Producers Guild has a spring CSA, and we've had a fall CSA to push the growing season beyond what you're going to get at the farmers markets and so on. And in the pre-COVID years, we used to have farm to table for the people dinners, which were great because there's a lot of really high dollar, high zoot farm to table dinners, but we wanted to set them up where we could all share food, rent the space, and feed our families for $10 admission. So those are things that the Guild is doing. We're certainly not as robust as Mountain Roots. We're not as big and impressive, but we're a little group that's doing a lot, I think, for local food. And now you know about us through our free Wix website, right? You know where to find us. That's how you register. All right. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dannah Leeman with the Western Colorado University's Center for Cold Climate Food Security.
Hi, folks. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Good. My name's Dannah. As Sue introduced me so well, I'm a graduate student at Western, but I'm also the AmeriCorps Vista for the Center for Cold Climate Food Security. So we are not a nonprofit, but we are an organization underneath Western's umbrella. And we exist, it's a relatively new organization established in 2018 by Dr. Kate Clark, if most of you know her. And we exist to amplify experiential opportunities for students in the Gunnison Food Shed. And that's just a fancy way of saying we exist to connect Western students to opportunities to help better the food shed in Gunnison and surrounding areas. So being a relatively new organization run by just one professor on campus, there hasn't been a lot of visibility for us or huge projects, but a few things we've been working on this year and with some master students in the past are working on, some of you folks may have heard of the Massive Passive project. So trying to get some passive solar a huge greenhouse or a series of a couple greenhouses on campus and at a few partnering locations, as well as we've successfully created a new intersectional food studies program at Western. So just increasing food studies curriculum because there is a huge community. I'm sure a lot of you folks are involved and or have been reached out to by tons of Western students about getting involved with the local food system here. So that's a little bit about us. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Excellent, Dannah, thank you. And is Paul Planer on the roundtable tonight? And would you like to come tell us about your Locavore initiative, your vision of local food?
Yeah. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
So I'm Paul Planer, for those of you that don't know me, which is 99% of the population in Gunnison. I'm just a local conservation advocate and a self-described locavore. And this is kind of a little bit of a new idea on my part that, you know, I've helped out Susan on her farm, and obviously I grew up a farm kid. And so agriculture, gardening, farming, and all that has been a huge influence in my life, as well as, you know, outdoor activities and natural resources. So I run a small business very briefly, and I basically do habitat restoration projects throughout public and private land. And that kind of led to this whole idea, seeing the connectivity of all these micro ecosystems as we try to rehabilitate and restore habitat, kind of brings in that connectivity to the whole system. And it got me thinking through some discussions with Katie Dix over at the food pantry about trying to get wild game meat donations active again there. That was only a small part of this food ecosystem, and that we really needed to get a more well-rounded effort there to bring in all the works that's already ongoing in the valley with producers and growers, but kind of really build out the entirety of the true locavore movement, which is to eat local. And so obviously we can build that bubble of local to what is comfortable to us, and taking in, you know, additional climates in the San Luis Valley or, you know, downriver a little farther. But the main emphasis there is basically education on how there is so much local food available with the knowledge, you know, from all the experts that are here on this roundtable, Eric and those kind of guys, that the ability is there to have your own food security. And so another option to bring in is, you know, the natural resources of fish and game too. If it's an uncomfortable subject for some people, but if you just take away the impressions and you just look at it as proteins and sources of omega-3s, it's another important link that people sometimes overlook because of, you know, stereotypes or bad first impressions. And so my goal for this locavore movement is to kind of erase those self-imposed barriers that we put around different groups or different people, and just bring back more a whole centered thought process on what is local food. Back to you, Susan.
Well, that's great. I should say I didn't jump in right away. Paul, you were doing fine. And I was typing my comment, which said, I'd rather eat fish and game than protein from a Petri dish. So, and I, like you, I look around the Gunnison Valley and I look at the beautiful resources we have in terms of soil and land and water. And if we can conserve it and take care of it, we can feed ourselves. I think most of us are recognizing that the industrialized food system, or at least our industrialized civilization, is going through some sort of collapse. How far that goes, we don't know, but it's up to us to feed ourselves and to build a resilient local food system. Because, as I always say, what if the trucks stop running? And we don't know if they're going to stop running, but we can reach a point where maybe we don't need as many trucks bringing food into the valley and that we can sustain ourselves. So what I think is really beautiful about it is that Paul had some really interesting ideas and thinking outside the box. And so I thought, I'm sure we all have some ideas thinking outside the box of what we could do to facilitate. So if you think about what Mountain Roots is doing, they're clearly doing a lot. What else do you need? And I'm saying that to everyone in this forum. What else do you need? What can you think of? And how are we going to work together to build our food system? Does anyone want to talk verbally, or should we I'll read the chat.
I guess, Paul, I'd like to know how you want to get people involved with hunting and fishing in Gunnison, and kind of like take it from the Bubba's, you know, and then back to like the actual people who live here. So what are your ideas on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so basically, you know, there's some really bad stereotypes and stigmas to hunting and fishing. And so if you actually look at the trends in participation in hunting and fishing, it has definitely moved away from the good old boy network already. And so the typical older white male is becoming less and less a participant in hunting and fishing. And that's why you're seeing an overall decline in participation in hunting and fishing. And so really our true option in promoting ethical natural resource, you know, active management is what this is. You're actively participating in the management of the species. And so if you're going to take that on, you have to get in on more of the ground floor. You have to do it through education, and you have to be able to bring in younger generations of people. It's a tired old saying, but it's so true in so many things. If you look at farming or ranching, these old traditions die away because younger generations step out of that world and they move on into the next newest flashy thing. And so the thing to remember, I guess, about hunting and fishing is you live in a spot here where you can easily participate in this activity. I don't like to really call it a sport, but you can participate in the activities. And if you bring it back to the food aspect, if I invite you over for dinner and the food is good, right? You have a good positive impression, and you don't really get hung up on the other things that the food becomes kind of the unifier. And in my mind, this whole concept, food becomes the unifying thing that most people can agree upon. And so you can dissolve politics and religions and all those things with good food. Good food builds really strong memories that last. And so when you bring back those kind of ancestral traditions, and this is where gardening, gathering, fishing all comes into play, that's what humans collectively have been doing for generations upon generations. So this new modern farming, this new modern scientific diet-based synthetic foods, this is such a new experiment in the grand total of the human experiment. And so you have to not think of this as a new thing. This is returning to what you and your ancestors have been doing for generations. So you're coming home to the idea of, I can go pick berries, I can collect wild greens, I can fish. The bounds there are tremendous when you look at it as a food source, and start at that level, start at a food source level, because that's what's important to me. When you listen to Katie explain the needs of the food pantry, and I'm sure over at Mountain Roots with you guys doing your free markets too, giving away food, you see that increased demand and the real need for food. Through hunting and fishing, hopefully I'm getting to the answer to your question. It's a really long answer. But I think through hunting and fishing, it's just one more aspect of that same principle of, you know, relying on local foods first. And so you're in this area that provides all these wonderful foods. And it'll just take a little more outreach and a little more education to really expose more people to the benefits of it. And hopefully we can not get hung up on where we disagree on certain things, but just look at what unifies us and what collects us all, you know, across the board. And so what I had mentioned to Susan before was as a hunter or a fisher person, as a gardener, or as a gatherer, if you're just gathering wild food, berries and greens from we're all connected as under one roof as like a gatherer. We're gathering our food from a source that's natural. And so that builds within you when you're collectively participating in the food source like that, that builds an internal value there that's missing when you go buy a hamburger through a window, or you pick up a weird fruit that you can't pronounce and wonder where it came from in the grocery store. You don't have that connectivity. And so all these things, gardening and gathering and hunting and fishing, returns us back to that connectivity that we're really missing. And so, and you can also add, you know, ranching into there very easily. That is what kind of centers everybody back around that principle of that connectivity, how we're all interconnected, whether we agree on everything or not, we're all connected that way. So hopefully that answered some of your questions.
Definitely. Thank you. I love that.
And Paul, that was a beautiful synopsis. It looking at the chat window, you've really sparked a lot of people. So I'll just open it up, and whoever wants to hop in and discuss. I think Michelle wanted to speak, and maybe Kate. Take it away.
Yeah, Paul, I would just really, you're so passionate about your movement, and clearly so many of us are too. And I heard a lot of focus on conflict and stuff, and I would just remove that from your narrative. The way that you talk about connectivity and localism and the measurement of our food and its value and its sustainability by its footprint, by its food miles, is really enough. And there's just so much to build on from that in terms of marketability. I've always wondered about, I think that it's not legal to sell game and fish locally caught, and I don't know the regulations around that, but I know that they're heavy. And I just always wondered about capitalizing on our local fish, but also doing it in a really, really mindful way, because I also just want to send a caveat that we really cannot all go and pick the wild things willy-nilly. It's a thing to do very artfully and carefully. And there are people who do it very artfully and carefully and teach how to do it very artfully and carefully in our valley. People like Brianna Rose Wiles of Rooted Apothecary, who I thought maybe was going to be here. She's a mom. I'm sure she had other things to do. But anyways, this is such a rich topic. And I just don't think that you need to focus on the conflict around it, because you're right, it exists. But if I just may offer that feedback, you sort of entered with there is conflict, and there's also so much beauty and so much to get that, yeah, in the future talking about it, you can really focus on that.
I want to say that Brianna is going to be speaking tomorrow on foraging for wild plants and for food medicine. So if any of you guys are interested in that, I would jump in tomorrow.
This is Peggy. I think it's a super interesting topic. And one thing that came to mind to me is I fly fish. And of course, you know, I love to fly fish. I would do it as much as I could. But it's a lot of catch and release, which is fine. And I think the notion of having some sort of cause or event where it's fishing for locals, I just think people would really embrace that here. You know, people are passionate about their fly fishing anyway. They know that it contributes to a local food insecurity issue. I think that would be really powerful. So Paul, I really applaud you. I think you've really hit on something big here.
No, and it's a good point, Peggy, and it's actually one that Katie and I have had this discussion already. And I've actually talked with Brandon Diamond, who's our district manager at Parks and Wildlife. And so, you know, as someone who actively fishes, they have a lake trout derby. They call it that because they have to manage the lake trout in order to maintain kokanee numbers.
Yeah.
What I suggested to Brandon was, you know, they collect the fish heads for their research, and then they also have this little raffle thing through the fish heads. You catch the right fish, you get whatever.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted to bring to Brandon's attention is they caught like 4,100 fish the last fish derby. Imagine half of those fish going through the local food distribution system through Katie, because that's the legal channel to do it properly.
Yeah.
And so if we donate that food through Katie and the food pantry, imagine the poundage of fish in just one single fish derby on one species at one small window in the season.
Yeah.
It's a humongous amount of you know, available resource for those that would have no other means to get the resource.
Yeah, I'd love to be involved in something like that. I mean, there's nothing better than fresh trout. So yeah.
Well, while you all were talking, you probably didn't see everything going on in the chat because you've, again, really sparked it. I think there's a discussion of a community fish fry and maybe teaching people how to cook the fish, and we could all get together and eat the fish. And I would like to take the heads and guts and make fish hydrosalate, which is a fermented fish product that's excellent for backyard gardeners. We need to do this. So we just got to do it.
And Dannah, what you put in the chat, Gabby's a really good friend of mine. She's still, she works for Hunt to Eat. So that's an organization you guys should definitely check out. They try to get people that might not normally be in hunting circles to be in hunting circles. So maybe like women, things like that. And then also there is an organization called Open Arms of the Western Slope, and they do gun safety and gun training for women or people that just maybe are not normally in those circles. So that's also something to check out. That's run by Kate Clark. So you can also check that out.
Alexis, could you put the names of those organizations in the chat for folks? Great.
What other, in addition to Paul's outstanding idea of hunt, gather, fish, grow in the locavore movement, other people have tuned in with their vision for local food. Are there other topics that you're burning to talk about that we can all collaborate on? Chime in, anyone.
If I can chime in, what I have really found about local food is that there are a few mental barriers that come through, and some of them are true and some of them are not. But I think accessibility to cooking skills and understanding what is local at certain times of the year, you know, I'm sure most people on this call understand this concept, but the concept of endless abundance, that all types of food are available all throughout the year. So what does it look like to set up resources, easy to find resources for folks interested in what grows when and how they can still have a healthy, well-rounded diet by eating seasonally and locally. And shameless plug, there's a woman, Dana Zobs from Crested Butte Personal Chefs, who will be speaking a little bit about that. But if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to spark a conversation about that.
Well, I'd say, Dannah, along those lines, since I sell at the Gunnison Farmers Market and the Crested Butte South Market, it is amazing when people come up and maybe they want rhubarb in August. And in Gunnison, our rhubarb is ready in June and into July. And that's just one example. And then we've had people move to the valley and ask why we're not growing peaches. Well, I'm not sure how much climate change we need to have before we can grow peaches, but I don't want to ever grow peaches here. We need to teach people what is in season and what we can grow here. And it comes one-on-one, like at the farmer's market. People kind of figure it out, but truly educating people about eating in season is really important. And you know, maybe the Guild needs to add a section to our webpage. Maybe Mountain Roots can help with that education as well. Maybe we all just talk to our neighbors. Yeah, maybe you can do it. You did such a good job organizing this conference.
I think one thing with that is if you're a CSA member or you're going to the farmer's market, you sort of naturally eat seasonally, but the issue is cooking. A lot of our CSA members didn't know like what to do with certain things, and it might sit in their fridge for a couple of weeks. I actually still have squash sitting on my counter that's been sitting there for a couple of months because like even I as a farmer don't really know what to do with that squash, and so it's just sort of sitting up there. So I do think that like figuring out how we can teach people to cook these things like on a regular basis would be pretty important. Even I need it. Yeah.
Is this where we put in a plug for the Local Foods Cookbook? Right now, you know, the Guild is compiling this cookbook. Many of the folks who registered realized, oh, I get a free digital cookbook. But we envision that is going to be a working document that continues to grow. Because listen, right now we only have 18 recipes in it. So I bet most of the people on this call think about eating locally and what would you do if I handed you a winter squash? What would you cook if I gave you some collards that are in my greenhouse right now? What do you love to do with spinach? How do you cook turnips? I would love it if everyone who attends the conference would submit a recipe, because that's part of how we're going to share our knowledge too. And maybe Paul has a historical recipe with wild game that's been in his family for 3 generations. Those are the kinds of things that we could preserve. That knowledge and that information.
If I could chime in, one of our longer term initiatives is, as I mentioned, connecting our food efforts with the food hubs and other distribution locations, farm runners, for example, out of Hotchkiss, the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition down in Alamosa. And we do have a small amount of funding to launch a marketing campaign that we have tentatively titled "Why Local, How Local?" ? And it's the why and the how of local. And so I think what we could collaborate on and what we could use your input on is what is the message that we're sharing? I think Alexis made a good point that if we're going to our CSA customers in the farmers markets, we're going to people who at least already sort of know that they should be and are more likely to maybe seek out the information. But I think that the marketing campaign and educational messaging for the general public is to kind of shift a mindset, which is going to be pretty hard. So helping us as we design that campaign to understand what is our message, who needs to hear the message. I think we all agree we want to educate people, but what do we tell them and how do we get that message out? I would love to have some input on that when we reach that point in our program design.
Thanks, Holly. The floor is open if anyone is thinking of anything, thinking outside the box about local food. What are your needs? What do you need to know? How can we collaborate?
I think I see Katie waving her hand. Katie, would you like to share? I can unmute you if you'd like. There you go. You got it.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Kate has mentioned in the chat that she's hoping that she's with a group who might like to donate an elk when they come across one that wants to be fed to the neighbors. And I'd like to bring in what Paul is working on. He's creating a certificate, a game meat donation certificate, where when people have a wild game that they want to donate to the pantry, the only requirement that we have is that it has to be processed in a USDA facility. And sometimes people can donate the processing, and sometimes that's a little hard. So we have a game fund, a wild game processing fund at the pantry, and we can help meet the cost of the processing. And I hope Paul's going to come back to this and talk and tell what he's doing, because it's fantastic. And then I would like to say to everyone, if you find yourself in that position where you can offer a piece of wild game, to get in touch with us, and let's do it not only right, but affordably for the donor.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for sharing. It's always really great to hear how you can get involved with the food pantry. There's so many ways, even if it doesn't have to do with local food. So. I see Gail maybe waving. Gail, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit. So I've been tuning in kind of without my video on. And I love the conversation. It's been nice to hear from everybody. So I'm like what I guess I would fit into the category of backyard gardener. But I have gardened for years, and my husband and I are getting quite serious about it. And I don't know, sometimes we throw out the word homestead, and, you know, we do that in like are we actually there yet sort of a way. But we dream about that. And for me, like one need in the Valley, or one thing that I would love to see in the Valley, is I feel like there's this division. There's like the professionals and the farms and like the guild, and then there's hobby gardeners. And I often find myself feeling like I feel like I'm a little bit more than a hobby gardener. Like we're very serious about what we're doing. We're trying to eat our own food as much as possible. We're growing enough. Like last year we ate all the way from May 1st till December 1st, our own food from our own garden. And we've been eating stuff all winter that we've been canning, and, you know, winter squash that we've grown. So we're trying to be serious, and we're trying to have these goals, but I don't often feel like I have a community to share those, you know, that struggle with and ask questions to. And it's kind of like there's classes out there for like how to garden. And I'm like, okay, I know how to, you know, I know the basics. I don't need a basics class. I don't need gardening 101. I'd love to like have a community where we get together and visit each other's gardens and dig into like the more advanced level stuff, and what are people struggling with and what are they not struggling with, and, you know, how are you getting your onions to be so successful and not go mushy halfway through the winter, and, you know, how did you turn your basil into a whole hedge and just instead of having just these little basil plants, or, you know, those kind of questions. So for me, like I would love that direction somehow in our Valley, to get like that middle group of people together and form a club or a monthly meeting or some kind of thing. And maybe it's already out there and I just don't know about it. I don't know. So anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents, I guess, for tonight.
Gail, that is wonderful. I commend you on your success in homesteading and backyard gardening. And there are a lot of outstanding gardeners like yourself that are feeding themselves almost year round. Dave Schieffer, Robert Johnson, Sherry Redden on her farm has greenhouses. And so there are a lot of folks like you. We might be able to include that as part of the Gunnison Valley Producers Guild so that you didn't have to start a new organization. And there are 2 Facebook sites that you might be aware of if you're on Facebook. One is Gunny Valley Gardeners, and the other is the Gunnison Valley Gardening Network. So those are the 2 that I know of. And it's not quite like people are getting together in person. So I think it's a small resource. I think we do need to step it up a bit and have more connectivity. So, And Rachel, I just saw your comment, Rachel. I didn't know that Dave Schieffer had a club. I didn't realize that. Well, good. Let's I'll call him. We'll make him president of this new club.
I think we could do the Producers Guild too, as just being more of that. Sounds like we could learn from Gail. So I don't
Yes.
think you have to be a farmer to attend, and Robert Johnson attends, and
Yes.
yeah, the more the better. I say maybe come to the Producers Guild.
Yeah. And we could have some subsets. We could have some subgroups of people with various interests.
Cool. I love that, you guys. Thanks. Yeah, I think it would be really fun to expand the local food movement by encouraging people to see backyard gardening as a way to actually be sustainable. Yeah, I mean, there, you know, Paul and Paul Duba and Karen Emerso, they grow like so much of their own food, and Jen Schieffer. And I'm like in contact with those guys, but it still is kind of loose, you know. It'd be so nice to pull it together. Yeah.
On that note, Gail, there are a lot of people who are exploring the backyard chicken concept and realizing that they can raise chickens for eggs and or meat pretty easily, and it's a nice source of protein. And so I think, like the upscale backyard gardener, those people who are, you know, dabbling in backyard chicken production might be folks we could invite to join the Producers Guild too, at this sort of co-producer. You know, I'm not a pro, but and I'm not selling at the commercial scale, but what I'm trying to do is maximize my production of all kinds of things. I just think there's a tie there.
Yeah, very much so. And a lot of people who are serious about backyard gardening have chickens. You know, it kind of goes around here. We have chickens, and we use their compost, and it all ties together so naturally. So yeah, it kind of works really well together.
Rachel, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to explain that Dave, I don't even remember how he organized it, but I don't know, once a week for several weeks in a row, a few summers back, we met in his garden and asked questions, and he showed us stuff. And like I said, I really don't remember how it was organized, but I feel like Gail, this is so awesome, because I feel like it is just taking initiative and speaking up like you did. So yeah, let's get something going. I built a greenhouse last fall, and I have no idea how to use it. I would love some support. So I'm tuning in for that kind of thing. Thank you.
My husband and I have been like obsessively watching this YouTube channel of some folks homesteading up in Alaska, and it's like our outlet. You know, we're like, oh, what are the Alaskans doing? Oh, they're planting their such and such. And I feel like we could do something local, you know, like a local group that, okay, what are you planting? What are you doing? What are you starting? How's your greenhouse going? Stuff like that.
If I can chime in one more time, if nobody else wants to jump in, I don't want to take up space for folks who haven't spoken yet. Cool. Just really quickly, I'd like to bring attention to maybe the folks who don't want to garden, but also want to support local food. And also those who agree with hunting locally, but can't stand the thought of killing an animal, because it's so hard. I'll personally just go out there and say, I support local hunting. I think it's amazing. I think it's so important to know where your meat comes from. But the thought of killing something just like hurts me. And so how do we get folks like that? How do we get folks that, you know, maybe just a soft introduction to hunting? Maybe there's some sort of way that like we can combine those very traditional hunters, but also with those folks who just like animals are people too kind of people. Like, you know, I think if we have that divide, like we were talking about a little bit in the beginning, of like there's the hunters and then there's the non-hunters, but how do we make that so it's not so split? If anybody has any thoughts on that.
Oh, I can chime in a little. I don't want to take up too much space either. I want to allow some new ideas out there, but yeah, that's kind of bringing it back to this whole connectivity thing. I really think that if people start to realize that it's a basic food connection that we all share, it kind of eliminates those self-imposed barriers that we like to put up between groups, no matter across society. We do it all the time. And so if we bring it right back to the basics of just about good, wholesome local food, and however we introduce that to people through backyard barbecue events, or, when you have harvest time and you maybe do like the old time traditional harvest get-togethers where everyone kind of pitched in and helped everybody harvest their particular crop that time, and you provide that food then. There's where those, touching on another point, those people that are really good at cooking these special techniques for these foods that really make them shine, if we could get those folks there to kind of just cook and talk and demonstrate at the same time, like, people will pick up on that and realize we're all just one community trying to live and to eat and exist. And so I think the main thing for everyone is to not, try to look for division, but try to figure out what brings us together. And for me, I think this group has it already in just wholesome local food. We've got enough right there to keep everyone interested and to keep everyone engaged, just on one topic. And however you spread that topic out across the community, it travels. It has its own resonance.
Well, I'll say that I expected the local kitchen, the community kitchen concept to come up, and in part, I'm relieved that it hasn't. But okay, then I'm going to bring it up. What always occurs to me is my vision for local food is I would love to be able to just grow as much cabbage as I could, and then we could all get together and turn it into sauerkraut and eat it all winter long. And maybe we work on community storage of our squash. And then maybe we could have, once we're past COVID, have more potlucks during the winter. We have a lot of fall harvest potlucks and things like that. But I think getting together and figuring out how to preserve the food and cook the food is going to go a long way. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's easier to go to the grocery store and buy some crap in a bag. It is work to grow local food and cook local food and preserve local food. But that's where I think the quilting bee idea comes in. If we could do it together, we could distribute some of that work, and we could all learn a lot and keep these skills as well. But I don't know, I'm just a farmer. I don't know what that looks like. Folks, we've got 4 more minutes. According to my clock, does anyone else have something in their vision for local food that they really want to share? It feels like we've made good contacts, but what have we left out?
Hey everyone, can you see me? No.
Kimberly, we can see and hear you.
Oh, great. Can you hear me and see me? Hi, I just want to introduce myself. I'm really enjoying the conversation. I love the focus on locality. I love the focus on food sustainability. I've been a farmer for a little bit of time in many different avenues as such, but it's just so refreshing to hear these voices with many different solutions on how we can all coalesce together to really create a sustainable food system. I think this past year really hit home for me in regards to what my skill set is and what I can provide directly for my community. I also have a background in healthcare, but I also grow food in extreme environments. And I've just realized that, talking with you all and listening to you all and what you have to provide for this sort of solution, it's just rather inspiring and refreshing. And I just wanted to say that and say hello. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you. That was really nice.
Yeah. Does anyone else have something burning that they would like to share in the next 3 minutes? And also I'll suggest if you're about to go to bed and it pops into your head, or if you think of it in the morning, feel free to email me, Sue.Wyman at GunnisonGardens.com, or Dannah Leeman, whose email you probably saw as you registered, or contact Alexis at Iola Valley Farms. And our emails, Alexis and mine, were on that PowerPoint that scrolled through at the beginning. You'll see it again for the rest of the conference. So unless someone else has something really urgent, just thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Paul, especially for sharing your vision. Thanks, Holly and Katie, for everything that you're doing. And I feel inspired. I'm just inspired by everyone on this call. We got this. So remember, tomorrow night we have 2 more sessions, and then the conference is also Saturday from 10 to 2. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for showing up, and the chat room will be open for a little while. And again, email us and let's all connect.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Is your mic on?
Hmm?
Is our mic on?
Mic on?
Is our microphone on?
Yeah.
Hey, is Paul still on here? Yeah, I see. I just stayed on because something Katie said stuck with me about Katie said the only restriction they have into accepting a hunter's donation and then redistributing it is that it has to be processed at a USDA facility. And that's come up even, from Parker Pastures and Calder Farm, the fact that we have to have USDA processing to make anything legal. So I wonder if we need to start there. How do we bring USDA processing and make it more accessible, not just to hunters, but to all of our producers, if that's the barrier? And then I wanted to ask, is that really the barrier, or is there a way around that barrier? Is there any sort of alternative that would work? I'm okay with trying to find a way around it if we can, if that truly is the barrier, but I just wanted to find out more about that particular restriction and test whether that's a limiting belief or an actual barrier. And we don't need to discuss it now, but I think it should be earmarked for something we look into more later. It's a policy issue, but it's a thing.
Holly, I agree entirely. If I could jump in, and I think we need to look at Wyoming, which has some incredible food sovereignty laws, and the same thing in terms of being able to raise and process rabbits and sell them. We can't do that.
Yeah.
But other states can. And I think that this may be a place where we, I don't know, maybe we get a Western student to lead the rally to petition our legislators to get some laws changed. If
right.
we explore and find that it's illegal, that doesn't mean no, it just means not yet. And we're
right.
the people. So I think we just push back on all of that. Food sovereignty.
That's true. I'm aware of some food sovereignty movements in Maine that have been pretty successful, where they've just said, we make a demarcation of our boundary, and within these boundaries we have different rules. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Right.
Weren't there plans to be a processing plant down by the airport?
I don't know. Yeah, Brian Hess is doing that. He's just barely poured the foundation, but I don't know that he's going to be fully USDA certified right away. He might start out being more like Guerreri, the meat processing at the base of Craner Hill. And it can take a while to get that USDA certification. But yes, he is working toward that. It's a ways out. Yep. Hi, Heidi.